I'm here in Oklahoma to see if I can get under the skin of little-known Russian painter Boris Chetkov. Boris Alexandrovich Chetkov was born in the Soviet Union near the Ural Mountains in 1926 and grew up under the harshest years of Stalin's regime. In its turbulent first decades, the Soviet Union was dogged by famine and punctuated by Stalin's ruthless purges. Yet, Chetkov had an idyllic childhood on his grandfather's farm and found means to paint and draw, inspired by the colourful Russian folk art that surrounded him. This promising start took a downward turn. As a young man, he was sentenced to a year in the Gulag, and then almost immediately conscripted into a tank regiment to see out the last days of the Second World War. He was 39 years old when he finally graduated from the Mukhina School of Art in then Leningrad. For the next 20 years, Chetkov led a double life, officially working as chief glass artist at the Vishaya glass factory by day and painting furiously in secret by night. For me, this is a fascinating painting. It was painted in 1960 and it's called The White Horse. What's really interesting about it is it's abstract, but there's just a hint of form. Here you have, what, maybe two legs, and I think that might be an ear there, and also amazing, strong orange here, and this sharp royal blue. It is during this time that Chetkov's mature style emerged, especially his highly distinctive, flamboyant colour palette. This painting is called Male Portrait. It was made in 1982 and it's right towards the end of Chetkov's real period of portraiture. Like many of the works he made around this time, he's used a large palette knife to scrape thick layers of paint across the canvas, which gives it this really vivid, really raised texture. What I think is really interesting about this work is that while he's called it a portrait, he's actually depicted two faces that are somehow split along the middle. I think Chetkov may be alluding to the split nature inherent to every Soviet citizen's life, with one public persona that was quite different to their private, innermost thoughts, where they had much greater freedom. He painted many portraits during this period, many of which nod to the Russian avant-garde. I think the influence of the avant-garde is evident even in his much later work, such as this painting from 1987. Although it's clearly mature Chetkov, it shows his much later style with this bold, painterly brushwork and a much more bright and almost quite lurid colour palette. I think he's actually paying homage to a Russian avant-garde artist called Malevich, who painted a painting called Englishman in Moscow, including a sabre and a fish. And it's quite interesting to note here that there is what appears to be a sabre running across the top of the portrait and coming out of his neck, a fishtail. And so while this is very much archetypal of Chetkov's work, the beautiful colours, the portrait with the face part obscured and just one eye boldly staring out, I think he's actually looking backwards as well as forwards and paying homage to his Russian forebears. In 1979, he was forced to leave his job at the glass factory. For the next 5 years, he painted little and with a markedly dulled and muted palette. In 1990, on the eve of the collapse of the Soviet Union, Chetkov experiences a period of intense productivity when he paints many large abstract paintings. I think this is a wonderful example of what I would call Chetkovian almost abstract painting, with this confident swathes of paint covering it. But it's only at second glance that you start to pick out silhouettes. And in the centre, a man playing the cello. And it's only then that the painting's title, Concert, becomes clear. I think it's a wonderful example of how Chetkov uses colour first and then later adds detail to create form, which is very much a classic example of his technique. The new millennium signalled a return to more traditional genres, and Chetkov created fiery still lifes and epic landscapes with a distinct sense of nostalgia. He returned obsessively to the same settings and subjects,
that had taken on a great personal symbolism for the artist.
A rather intriguing feature of Chetkov's paintings that seems to appear again and again is this bold sweep of colour that comes round from the left to the right and back again to the left. It appears again and again in his works.
Chetkov continued to paint in his final years, with his eyesight possibly fading, and these paintings are recognisable by an extraordinarily heightened, almost psychedelic colour scheme. Boris Chetkov was an artist devoted to painting, and one who worked solely for himself, without real hope of recognition for most of his life, until his death in 2010 at the age of 85.
Boris Chetkov is an outlier, always determinedly following his own path. His vivacity, tenacity and narrative use of colour prove he deserves to be considered for a place in Russian art history.